All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jacob Smith. I'm the Director of Membership at the Cricket Club. I'm here with Jonathan Zabusky, who's been a member for the last couple of years, and former president of Grubhub, current entrepreneur and investor and advisor and all-around good guy. So thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jacob.
My pleasure. And thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to chat for a little while. You're all going to be on mute for the first half hour or so. And then we will unmute you all and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. Recommend that you all put set your Zoom to speaker view so that you can see our pretty faces the whole time. And we'll take it from there. So I think the first thing I'd like to do, Jonathan, is to ask you to just give a little self-bio, introduce yourself, let everybody know why you're qualified to do this.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for tuning in. It's my pleasure to be here. And so just to give a little sense of my background, originally a New Yorker, so I always like to say that. I love everything about Philadelphia but the sports fans, but we've been in the area for the last 12, 13 years or so. Started my career in investment banking, moved from there into venture capital, and then ultimately it was really all towards a path into getting into an operating role ultimately in technology. And so went to business school out in California. Right around where we arrived, 1999, and by 2001 we graduated. The entire market, of course, had collapsed. Spent some time at the Boston Consulting Group doing management consulting, and always with a passion for consumer-driven businesses. Ended up moving here in 2007. Our daughters were 3 and 1, wanted to be closer to our families, and both myself and my wife went to the University of Pennsylvania, so we did have some connection to the area. And I came to work for Aramark in 2007. And this was, shortly after Aramark had gone private in a large leverage buyout. And 6 months before that or so, they had acquired a small company at the time, a company by the name of Seamless, which was one of the pioneers in online food ordering. And Aramark bought it so that they could use that technology across a variety of their business verticals. And so my main responsibility as part of the Executive Leadership Council there was to help integrate Seamless into the mothership and try to capture some of those synergies, and did that for a few years. And then by 2009, it became clearer and clearer as the management team of Seamless, the founders, cycled out of Aramark, that the opportunity, while big on the business side for Seamless, was even bigger in the direct-to-consumer side. And so we ended up spinning the company out, Seamless, out of Aramark, with the help actually of a couple of Cricket Club members. So a brief shout out to John Ryan and Rob Rambo, who both spent a fair amount of time working with me and with the business over the years. And so we ended up spinning the company out. Aramark kept a financial position, but largely spun it into an independent entity, of which I ultimately became the chief executive officer. And from, at that point, ended up raising external capital from 2009 effectively until 2013, pedal to the floorboard, built the team out, went from being a wholly owned subsidiary to being an independent entity, and growing a very New York-centric business that had a lot of connection to the business community, to one that was much more integrated into the fabric of urban life. And so what started out in Manhattan grew to Brooklyn and Queens and Jersey City, to Boston, to Chicago, to Los Angeles, to San Francisco. And with the advent of the iPhone, e-commerce was well on its way, but this was still the infancy, of course, of mobile commerce. And so we had the wind at our back at that point. And so we spun the company out. We grew it until 2013. At that point, merged the company with Grubhub, in a very complementary transaction. The companies were, the pieces fit together really nicely. We ended up taking the company public in 2014, which was, just an amazing experience for myself and my team. I ultimately left the business at the end of 2015. At that point, I was the president and on the board of directors of Grubhub, now a publicly traded company. So I'd gotten that experience, but I was commuting to New York and to Chicago basically 4 or 5 days a week, not spending very much time with my family. And so left at the end of 2015, and really for the last 5 years, I've hung my own shingle. So I do I do investing, advisory, board work for a variety of startups, early stage companies, and growth stage companies. And through that portfolio, I get to have all the best parts of the CEO job, while at the same time having the flexibility to spend time with my family and just getting a broader view on a bunch of different businesses as opposed to being deep in any particular one.
Terrific. So let's rewind about 10 years. Because I'm living in New York at the same time as you are, right? This is like 2009, 2010, and Seamless is all anybody knows. As far as, if you want food delivered and you want it at your doorstep, you go on Seamless. And that's, very different than kind of the way the tech is today and the way that we think of what I refer to as third-party delivery companies. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. So how do you see kind of the evolution from the way that Seamless was considered 10 years ago, like through Grubhub and now to kind of Grubhub, Uber Eats, and DoorDash and Postmates, which are all considered kind of third-party delivery companies?
Yeah, so there's a lot packed in there. So I'll do my best to try to be brief. I mean, look, I think I'm 46. I grew up in a world, lived in Manhattan at a time when they stuffed menus under the doors. And while delivery was always pretty significant in a market like Manhattan with the urban density, so the ability for restaurants to deliver on their own behalf at scale and in a cost-effective manner was really always there. And so the business really started as a means to help independent restaurants who had the inability to market themselves. So, they start a business, they were good at making food, good at, likely at producing a good in-store experience, but they were stuffing menus under doors. So by definition, their reach they had was capped by their ability to physically put these menus in places. And obviously the internet changed all of that by effectively reducing the barriers to allowing brands to push, the word out. And we were effectively a marketing company. Effectively a digital marketing company that also enabled online ordering. So we brought a something to them, which was effectively the world of new customers and the ability to maintain relationships with existing customers by having a very robust, promotional email campaign that we would offer them. The ability to do different marketing campaigns as well as acquiring new customers, and building at the time, which was a best-in-class online ordering experience. So we always joked in the beginning that people came to Seamless, the first order you placed was rarely with a new restaurant. It was typically with a restaurant you'd already ordered from, but it was a better, faster, and more accurate way to place an order with a restaurant you already had a relationship with. So the value for a restaurant was in increasing the reach, but also increasing and improving the efficiency of that ordering process itself. So from their perspective, not having to answer the phones as much, not having as many inaccuracies in a particular order, which cost them a lot of money when an order would be sent back and had to be redelivered. And that was what online ordering was in the beginning. Increased reach, improved efficiency, but largely doing it on behalf of restaurants that had their own delivery mechanisms. The next stage, of course, was, there's a whole lot of restaurants that either don't deliver, either they don't get enough orders, don't want to deliver because it's a highly complex business to manage that staff, hire that staff, train that staff. It became clearer and clearer to us, Seamless and Grubhub, that we needed to add on the ability for restaurants to use us as a delivery infrastructure company. Much in the way you think about Domino's as being very vertically integrated, marketing, product, online ordering, but delivery, we were going to do that, a full stack set of services for restaurants. And so that evolution, of course, was outside of our initial core competency, the ability to both develop a delivery infrastructure, logistics capabilities. How do you bundle orders? What's the right number of orders per driver route? Those were all things that we built and had to home grow. This is, talking about the period of like 2014 through, 2000, where we are today. And so the coupling of that delivery infrastructure on top of that. And so that's really where we are today is, some restaurants like it just for the marketing, some like it just for the delivery, some like the whole thing, the whole stack. And I think, going forward, I think the big question is if you're a given restaurant, do you want all of those? Do you want some of those? And what is the right way to price them relative to the value that they're going to create for a given restaurant, each of which has a very different position, a different set of skills, a different amount of capital to invest. And so that's really where we are today.
Right. And like we were talking about a little earlier, most restaurateurs, chef owners are in the food business. They're not in the marketing business. They're not in the accounting business. They're not in the logistics and operational delivery models. And also understanding, what's our ROI on that? Does it make sense to be having full-time delivery drivers? It's just, for most restaurateurs, not where they want to spend their time, right? And so, we were talking a little bit about the, kind of Grubhub in the news right now, and the fact that the commission that some of these companies are taking from restaurants has been a little bit contested. As far as, how do we create a world where everybody wins, where the restaurants win, where the consumers win, and where the delivery companies are able to bring the products between the restaurants and the consumers in a fair way. And so I'd like you to expand on what you were just talking about a little bit, because when you explained it to me the first time, it was a little eye-opening to me, and I'm sure will be for everybody else. The idea of segmented offerings from third-party companies, and the fact that restaurants have options as far as what they take, effectively what they take you up on.
Right. So I think, in the beginning, many restaurants didn't even have a website. Okay. Now every restaurant has a website, at least. I think it is really interesting to consider that many of those websites, while they may look prettier now than they've ever looked, and they do, right? Many of them still do not offer the ability to have a quality online ordering experience from a particular restaurant website. I think that's a really important fact to keep in mind. So many customers of a given, let's say you have a favorite restaurant, I'm sure you do. And if I asked you right now, are you more likely to go, when you know exactly where you want to order, Jacob, are you more likely to go to that restaurant website or to Grubhub? And I think there's an insight in there, in that at least what our research has sort of shown, and in my own house and the research I did when I was, we were running Grubhub, is that oftentimes, even if, the platform offers two paths. One is discovery, find something new, right? And use user-generated content, use other data that we can bring to bear to help you make a decision if you want to try something new. But the other path is I know exactly what I want, whether I know it's a specific cuisine type or, even more particular, a certain restaurant. Well, then the question is, why are you using Grubhub or Uber Eats or DoorDash? And I think the truth right now is that's oftentimes, I would say the vast majority of times, a better and a higher quality experience to place that order. So I think some of the debate that's going on right now is a little simplistic in that it really doesn't look at the root of the problem and the root of the issue, and that it's not necessarily about these companies having outsized control. It's that they have a place that consumers want to be. And you ask yourself why. Some of it is for that choice, for the discovery, but the other is still, I think, restaurants, and, it's every restaurant's in a different position. There are tools, there are things out there that, even if you're a chef, owner, operator, that, it is important to take it upon yourself to make sure that your customers are able to be really well served, through your own website and your own properties. And with that comes, potentially a much more favorable set of economics.
Right.
And so to your other question about that stack, look, if I was opening a restaurant right now, right, what you'd want to do, in addition to making great food and having a great experience, is you'd want to offer your own customers, those who are loyal to you, a really high quality digital experience for a lot of reasons. I'd also list myself on all the other platforms. Would I do it forever? I don't know. The truth is, you can turn these platforms on, you can turn them off. As you develop a more loyal following, you may choose to turn it off. You may choose to use it only for the delivery component because you don't want to manage delivery. There's a lot of flexibility in how you can use these services. But where I think the industry is right now, and some of the public debate going on, is the one in terms of market power, but the other in terms of the value in exchange for a high commission rate. The onus is definitely on these companies to demonstrate value, incrementality of customers, higher check averages, better loyalty, improved efficiency and unit economics for the restaurants. And if they're unable to do that, over time, they're the ones that are going to come under pressure, not the other way, where they're going to be able to exert power and raise rates.
Right. And I think also there's onus on restaurants to, what's your business model, right? Especially in the coronavirus world that we are living in right now and maybe living in for a while to come. Delivery is going to be a significant part of their business, right? Delivery, curbside pickup, digital ordering, contactless ordering. And so the restaurants are going to need to figure that out. And so, I guess my next question is, how do we get them there? How do we take the, mom and pop restaurant who may not have the expertise to, set up a good digital experience for their customers and may need that full stack from Grubhub or Uber Eats or DoorDash, right? From marketing, digital ordering, delivery, which means a higher fee. How do we get restaurants to the point where maybe they have their own delivery service and they have, right? So, and all that they're using these companies for is marketing for new customers, right? How do we get restaurants to that point?
Yeah, I think it's a two-part answer. One is, I think restaurateurs, owner-operators, and they come in different forms, from the investor all the way to the chef, owner-operator. They need to understand that the business has evolved. And just like they might hire a traditional marketing person, and they need to develop this capability. And the analytic capability, the ability to sort through the different options and take this really seriously. And it's not enough to say we're being overcharged. In my view, you got to take control of your own business. And like all businesses have to evolve and think about new things. I mean, this happens to every business that experiences disruption,
indeed,
and destruction and growth. There's opportunity in that. And the ones that are adapting quickly are really taking advantage of the situation. You see it in COVID right now. Those that are able to act quickly, be decisive, sort through those opportunities, and some won't. And some, the world as we know it is changing. It's been changing. This will accelerate that change. And so the one message is, take this threat as an opportunity. And if you can't do it yourself, you may want to bring in, additional talent to do so. I think second, what I'm seeing, more now my post Grubhub world and more my, direct investing and advisory world is a new crop of companies coming up right now that see that it's gotten a little unbalanced, and this perception of power and the reality of the power between the third party, you call them online ordering or delivery companies, is out of whack. And there are sets of companies out there that are looking to provide a more compelling set of services to restaurants to help them do a better job of directly managing their relationships, directly managing their own orders, directly managing their own assets, if you will, as opposed to outsourcing everything to the third party. And with that, I think comes a different economic and business model that they're charging. They may not all be charging a percentage of sales. They may be charging a flat fee order. They may be charging a flat cost per month type of model that restaurants might see as being better aligned with the outcome that they're looking to do. And so I'm absolutely seeing it. I'm involved in a couple of things. I find it interesting to have spent all these years trying to help Seamless and Grubhub build. And now as the different chapters have unfolded in the industry, I now see even greater opportunity, not in this full aggregation, but thinking about how to help the restaurants take back their traffic and take back their futures.
Right. And I think if you're a restaurant now, if you're a coffee shop in Chestnut Hill or you're a local kind of bar/restaurant, and maybe you haven't even had a website in the past, right? Certainly there are places that I look up and it goes right to their menu pages account because they don't have a website. Where would you start? What would the first thing that you would say, okay, Grubhub, I'm paying 30 to 40% in commissions because I have them doing marketing, online ordering, and delivery, and I want to start to pull this back into my own control. what would be the first step that you'd take?
The first thing I'd say is define what your objectives are. You really have to carefully define, is my objective to get more customers? Do I feel like I need more customers? Or do I want to deepen the relationships I have with existing customers? Do I want to improve the economics I have with my existing customers? Is this about the top line? Is this about managing my operational costs? So, the other thing that these companies do is some of them are point of sale systems themselves. Some of them integrate into those systems. Do I want to facilitate contactless ordering? Is that something that's important to me, either because of health and sanitary considerations, or is it an efficiency play where I want people ordering from their seats and not taking up valuable resources, server time, and all of that? So it's really around problem definition. And while it's difficult to solve all your problems necessarily in one, the first step is, I think, really to define what is the most important problem you're facing, and then go about finding a solution, and ultimately to find a solution that aligns the interests of the partner with the restaurant and ensure that the consumer is not really left behind. But each restaurant is really facing a different issue at the top, right? Some great restaurants don't struggle with volume. They have tremendous reputations. And it surprises me when I go onto one of those restaurant websites. I'm like, this is a very popular restaurant. Who wouldn't want more business, of course? But it always surprises me that the experience that you get, actually, once you've decided to order, to actually place that order is not as good as Grubhub, Uber Eats, or Postmates, or something like that. And there's really, that's an easy thing to fix.
Right. And everybody's going to realize, if they haven't already, in the next month or 2 months or 3 months, that it has to be at the top of their list. It just has to be.
I mean, you're seeing it. I work with a company right now that was very focused. And the initial idea was around just facilitating tabletop ordering. So don't think about McDonald's, but think about a step or two up from there, where typically you would, or probably 2 steps, where you would typically have a server. But the server himself or herself wasn't necessarily adding very much to the restaurant experience. They were a good person, but you didn't need a lot of information from them. You didn't need a lot of suggestions from them. But the idea, was around, how do we just make it so that we can order directly from the tabletop using your own device? That fits in really nicely in a COVID world, right? It's more sanitary, and it helps potentially restaurants control their cost structures or shift that labor to a higher value offering. I bring this up only because we're seeing requests just literally, we're talking about requests that are up several 100% month over month. And that's just one specific use case as restaurants try to prepare for what it is to come out of COVID and take the steps as we go forward towards releasing some of the social distancing guidelines.
So let's keep talking about the kind of in-venue dining experience, right? So we've talked about the third-party model and the delivery model. Now let's talk about, what's the next 2 months from now when restaurants open back up? Certainly we're not going to all get menus with the same menu book that we then pass on to the next customer and are passed around. So what do the options look like, right? You're having customers come in and let's start with contactless ordering opportunities. So without getting into necessarily the service model, but just menus, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think what you've seen, many of you may have seen this happen in the form of iPads on tables years ago. That's been around for years. It started really in the world of wines, where it's the kind of purchase you want to think through. And so a sommelier that's fine if you're dining at a white tablecloth restaurant, but a lot of servers don't know wines as well. And so it started there. And that helped people make a decision and use the time more effectively. I think now we are at a point where the technology allows all that information to be on your own device, and the ability for a device to recognize where it is instantaneously, either through near field communication, chip, or through a QR code on a table. So you can instantly be recognized by using your camera, put your camera over a QR code. It instantly launches the website. And so if it's about ordering or it's about just information, that's here and now. And there are plenty of solutions that do that. And of course, what that allows is a a way for people to progress through the restaurant experience without being in contact with a menu that's been handled. So even if you hand out, even if you're a restaurant that wants to continue menus, you're going to have to wipe them down each time. I mean, it is an onerous, expensive process that I think just from that perspective will be changed. Kiosks have gotten more and more popular. I mean, if you walk into a Honey Grow or you walk into a McDonald's, but those, I mean, even in a pre-COVID world, at Honey Grow, there's a giant thing of Purell sitting right next to it.
Right.
My view is over the coming months, people are just going to be less and less interested in doing that if there is another option.
Right. I personally love the features that come along with digital ordering, contactless ordering. I love a great experience with a server who's funny and friendly, and there's no replacement for that. But I also love to, click on a certain wine and see where it's from, what attributes it has, what it pairs well with, and make an informed buying decision rather than, I think I've had this one before and I think I liked it and it seems like it's relatively well priced, so I think I'll go with that one, right? And so there's an opportunity for restaurants to have their consumers feel more informed. It's better for upselling, right? The more information you have, and you make people more excited to place orders.
I think that's right. And then you can personalize that. There's a whole spectrum of personalization that, the data set allows you to do. I mean, those who are really open with their data, and especially a restaurant, you could see a world where your experience is really being heavily personalized. You ordered this last time. Would you like to reorder it again? You ordered this last time. Let me suggest that people who ordered this really enjoyed this as well. And so we always said, on Seamless and Grubhub and all these different platforms, there's a few ways to personalize the experience through data. There's user-generated content, ratings, reviews. But we also know just from the actual ordering data what you liked because you tend to reorder it. So there's no better and more objective way to measure likability than behavior itself. Because user-generated content tends to have some skewing in it. Those who contribute typically had a great experience or a bad experience, and it really wipes out the middle. But I think it could significantly enhance the experience for the customer. A restaurant could, allow them to push new things that you might like to, again, continue to make the experience new and different. So I'm personally very excited about it. And I don't think it means, it's a binary, no personalization or all personalization. I'm giving you all my data. They could just say, people like you who added this to my cart also like this. So I think there's a lot that can be done, from that, just in terms of enhancing the experience.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, so two-part question. One is, how quickly do you think a restaurant could adapt technology to, if restaurants are opening a month from now, could a restaurant be in a position to have a QR code on a table that you're scanning with your own device and seeing all of the features that we're talking about? Is that feasible for a place to, and a mom and pop place, not a place with $1 million of resources and corporate and all of that kind of thing? Let's start there.
I mean, from my perspective, I don't think it's an overstatement. It's extreme. The technology has never been more robust. It's never been easier to implement and understand. It's, from a usability perspective, it's become easier and easier. The thing you run into, and what we've always run into, is that people who've been in the business for a long time are used to, so we're all like that in the things we do. Change is difficult.
Right.
And so when you've thought about it a certain way, you have to be open to change. You have to embrace it. You have to see it as an opportunity, not a threat. But I think it's never been easier. And again, I think there are degrees of this. This is not, putting robots instead of people into a restaurant and implementing something like that on that type of scale. Doing tabletop ordering, I think there are vast swaths of the population that are very used to, hovering a camera over a QR code. From a restaurant's perspective, there's literally almost no implementation to that. It is the same. In fact, those orders will be directly injected into an existing POS point of sale system. And so from their perspective, it's even easier. It reduces inaccuracies. It saves time. It might increase table turnover. You don't want to rush people out of the restaurant, but there's no sense in waiting time to place your order if you're ready. Asking somebody if they want another cocktail,
right?
Giving someone a check, the ability to pay that check. And so I think the implementation is relatively easy and straightforward as long as you have the right mindset.
All right. So now comes the tricky part, which is, we're battling high unemployment. We're battling a landscape where, everybody's trying to put food on the table, and that includes people who work in the hospitality sector, right? And so if restaurants are moving to a digital contactless ordering platform, certainly there must be a room for some servers and some staff, but at the same time, restaurants need the efficiencies, the labor efficiencies that will come as a result of this, because business is going to be down. You're not going to be able to seat people right next to each other the way you used to be able to. And so to a certain extent, if the restaurant needs better efficiencies in order to be able to stay open and serve their customers and bring them a quality experience, it almost feels like, the third party there that's getting dropped a little bit is the service staff and the servers. I don't necessarily have a question or a solution. It just feels like almost the next shoe to drop, which is like the next evolution of hospitality staff and service staff is going to be something completely unlike what it is now, because so much of those duties are going to become digital.
Yeah, I think that is the reality of the restaurant industry and hospitality in general, and I think that's a microcosm of like some broader trends that are going on across the economy in different sectors, and that's, I think, a challenge and something that needs to be carefully weighed, by different policymakers in different ways. But for an individual mom and pop restaurant, they'll have some difficult decisions to make. And look, if they choose to be less profitable, or they see the wait staff as being more critical to the experience, then more power to them. And
right.
Many of them will go that route. But for certain types of restaurants, I think the reality is some of that labor, you can move those costs to investment in other areas, whether that's people or marketing or enhancement of the physical plant or developing delivery only kitchens and models. And that's another trend that we're seeing right now, is both existing restaurants and brands opening up, secondary and tertiary sites that don't even seat customers as well. Those create jobs too. And so, one thought is that efficiency does get reinvested in different ways in the economy. It may not be in the sense of, wait staff, but other jobs are created. And I think that's the nature of the economic model that we're in, and certainly if you're someone who is a career waiter or wait staff, it certainly gives you something to think about. But I think these types of changes they're not going to happen overnight,
right?
And they will give people an opportunity to adapt to that and make the appropriate choices they have to make about their own careers and lives.
But the same way it happened to manufacturing over the last 10 to 20 years, I think the digital revolution is coming to hospitality in the next, and maybe it would have been the next 10 years. And now with current circumstances, it might be the next 2 years or 3 years.
I do think it'll be accelerated, right? I think, the sad reality, I think, of this, and I'm not an economist, but I'm certainly following the hospitality industries. We're going to see a lot of restaurants go out of business. Right. Because it's just too difficult if you have a restaurant that seats 60 people to only now be able to seat 15 or 20. Right. You can boost your delivery, but delivery and in-store experiences, they're not the same. Some restaurants do it really well. Over the years, we met so many restaurants who said, we don't want to do delivery. This is about an in-store experience. Our food doesn't travel well, and even if it traveled well, it wouldn't be as good as coming straight out of the saute pan onto somebody's plate. But everybody's in a fight for survival. I do think as the economy hits whatever shape you think it's going to hit, we will rise again, and the new concepts that replace some of the old concepts may not look the same. Right. The whole mindset of starting a new restaurant 2 years from now may be very different from the restaurant that they're replacing. From the physical plant to the operational model to the type of talent that may be actually a partnership in that business. And so I think it's difficult for some to adapt, but I think we've seen over the years, the American economy and the worker has adapted pretty well to some of these changes, but there's obviously a lot more work that has to be done.
All right. So let's fast forward 3 years from now, 5 years from now. We've talked about some of the technological advancements that might happen in the next 2 months and next 6 months and year. What's what's the big pie in the sky kind of next wave of tech that's going to change the way that we, that's going to change food service, right? What's that? I'm sure you're involved with companies and looking at these kinds of things all the time right now. So like 3 to 5 years from now.
I think there's a couple of things. And again, I don't know that some of these I think are kind of more definite than others. But one, I'll start with robotics and automation. I've seen some incredibly interesting models coming out of MIT in particular of, think about Honeygrow. For those who know it, right, it's a place where you can get a stir fry, rice or noodles, among other things. And right now there's somebody standing over that wok, pulling the different ingredients, mixing it and putting it into a box. I've seen it myself. I've seen that done by a robotic type mechanism.
So you put your order into the POS at your kiosk, and then the robotic arms start working in the back.
You can watch it. There's different ways to, and again, this is just one model I've seen. I think aspects of, if I've seen pizzas made that way, and I think that's a certainty that will happen. How big it will be, I don't know, but from a quality control, right? You get the same product every time. Right. You manage your costs and the rest of it from a hygiene perspective. It has certain challenges. I don't mean to say it's like a panacea, but the ability to do that, I think, is coming. It's here in certain places. It's being refined. So that's one. I think the food production, and that could be everything from the actual production to back of the house, repetitive tasks being done more efficiently. Right. Both for cost reasons, but also quality control and health reasons. The second I don't think is necessarily specific to just hospitality or food service, but right now you have a Grubhub delivery driver, you have an Uber Eats driver. Where does autonomous vehicles, autonomous delivery? There are a number of companies that have these literally these small robots that are roaming the streets of Berkeley, California, doing the last mile themselves, being operated or being looked over by somebody who may be 1,000 miles away. And so I think that the world of looking outside and seeing 1,000 drones in the air doesn't sound that attractive to me. So maybe it's because I'm older. Maybe my kids will be fine with it. I don't know. But I think aspects of autonomous are certainly they're going to hit the ride sharing market, and they're going to hit the food delivery market. I don't know exactly when. I don't know. It's going to start in certain places and localities, and then grow from there. And what that can do to the experience, the cost structure, and the rest of it, I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. And I'm curious, just since you brought up Grubhub drivers, since the first time that Grubhub drivers has come up in this conversation, and so I'm curious. We were, up until a few months ago, in the tightest labor market that we've seen in years and years and years. We felt it here at the club when we're trying to hire cooks and hire servers. Salaries have increased. Just, it's been so hard to fill those spots. And so I'm curious, how was it to try and attract labor for Grubhub over the last year to 2 years? How have those costs been kind of passed on to consumers, right? How's that kind of impacted the business model? And then the third part of that, sorry to ask a 3-part question, is what does that look like right now with 20% unemployment?
Yeah, so I should start by saying, again, I've been out of Grubhub for a few years, right. So some of what I'm going to tell you may be well understood, but I obviously track the industry. No, it's been incredibly difficult. I don't think we've ever seen a labor market that was effectively at 0% unemployment among the type of people that we needed. So, you had a fight for drivers, so that led to increased wages, which ultimately needs to be borne by someone. Grubhub was fortunate that when we went public, we were a profitable company. It's still a profitable company today, but companies like DoorDash and Postmates and even Uber Eats are unprofitable. It means they're investing more than they're making, and that largely comes from building out markets, but comes from businesses that were initially subscale and facing very tight labor constraints. So you really only have 2 mechanisms to attract laborers. One is to make an attractive workplace, right? To be a place that people want to be, so that holding constant a certain wage, whether that's $15 an hour or $25 an hour, someone still has a choice to make. Do I want to work at Grubhub, Uber Eats, or some other company? And so I think the realization that it's more than just money for these folks, and how do you engage, a gig economy staff who doesn't come into an office and doesn't feel the corporate culture, was something that as I was on my way out, they were really trying to find ways to do that virtually, to engage that staff in a way to make them feel part of the team. We originally did that, by creating a lot of excitement. We had a culture where everybody was a stock owner. Every single person who worked for our company had some shares in the company. And again, that was just one part of a holistic, thing that we were offering. And the other is just, of course, you got to raise wages and be competitive.
Right.
And so, no, it was incredibly difficult. And you're always, you're constantly trying to keep, you're trying to build the business, and you're always trailing on the labor side.
Right.
And with that comes a deterioration of the service, longer wait times, and more unpredictability. And so the name of the game, in delivery is not just speed, it's predictability. So if you knew, Jacob, I could know with certainty my food would be here in an hour, give or take 10 minutes, that might be a lot more attractive than a 30 or 45 minute promise that had a much higher level of variability to it. And of course, in a tight labor market, it becomes very difficult to staff for that. But companies have invested tremendous amounts in data science and models to try to find the optimum at different points in time. Now, of course, things have changed. I would imagine there are, labor markets are obviously loosening. But, for some of these companies, they can't get enough because, delivery is increasing so much. But I have a view that you need to continue to engage these people as part of your company and not have an adversarial relationship, which seems to have really been more in the news lately than, the rah-rah, I'm happy to be working for a particular company.
Right. All right. So we'll end with one more thing that's been in the news recently, and then we'll open it up to everybody for Q&A. And when it comes to Q&A, after this, we will just unmute you all. So if you have a question, you can just chime in. You'll come up on speakerphone. Make sure you unmute your own device if you plan on asking a question, and we'll just take them one by one.
And if you're looking for golf tips, you got the wrong guy.
Right, you got the wrong two guys.
I will take some if you have any.
That's right. All right, so the next question is about this potential merger.
Oh, I hadn't heard.
Yeah, right. Between Uber Eats and Grubhub. And so I'll ask a very basic question, which is, why now? I would think, given business is up, business is booming, one would think delivery is going through the roof. This is the time to hold on what you have and invest in yourself. So why is this coming up now?
Well, look, I think there's a couple of reasons, and it's important to look at it from Uber's perspective and Grubhub's perspective, and they may have vastly different perspectives. So maybe I'll start from the Grubhub side, at least as I see it, and again, unaffiliated with the company. This is my own. I think there are a couple of things going on. Diners are becoming less loyal to any platform. Not all diners. Some, like the experience, they'll stay with it. But diners are chasing deals, and diners are looking for, if they view the experience as highly substitutable, i.e. the same, then what are they going to do? They're going to, if every restaurant's on every platform, everyone basically delivers the same way, then what is your basis of choice?
Just price.
Price. So you have a little bit of that. And that price doesn't necessarily mean, that if they combined that stick it to the restaurateurs, but there are, from Grubhub's perspective, you have very redundant cost structures, right? Think about it. You're both building, from a technology perspective, similar things.
Right.
You're both building delivery infrastructures that are not just asset heavy from multiple points of view, but they're technology heavy. You're both advertising out there. So there is a lot of redundant costs. So in any deal like this, you look at cost side synergies. What could we eliminate that's highly redundant that if we got rid of, nothing would change? And then you look at revenue side. So I think there's very clear and obvious cost side synergies. When we merged, I looked back in 2013, we put Seamless and Grubhub together. Like size companies, Seamless was a bit bigger. We got, a higher percentage of the company, but those pieces fit together really, really well from a revenue perspective. We were strong in different markets. Right. That's to some degree still the case. Grubhub has an incredibly strong position in some of the leading markets. But I think, first and foremost, there's very obvious cost side synergies. And so with that comes the ability to either make more money, but I think in this case, reinvest more in growth, expansion, better technology, potentially internet. Grubhub has shown no interest in international expansion as an independent company. Obviously, Uber Eats is in a completely different position to do that. So they may view it as a pathway for their shareholders to get a more diversified exposure to effectively increase the growth rate while taking down the expenses.
Right.
And I think from Grubhub's perspective, Uber, people don't necessarily think about a lot. I mean, Uber is one of probably the 3 leaders in developing of autonomous technology. Rightly so, given their business model. And if you believe what I talked before about one of the trends coming around autonomous, a company like Grubhub would need to invest so much money at this point in time that I think they're not going to do it. And so, again, that could be a long time off, but it's coming. So when you see something as a certainty, you see it as a place where you have to be. I think from their side, they see not that we've reached our peak, but we've reached probably our peak as an independent entity. We're still growing. The question is, will our stock continue to increase as an independent company? They just see more value for shareholders inside of a bigger ecosystem and one that could take costs out and avoid having to make a very, very serious commitment to autonomous technology.
Right. And at a time when they're still very attractive as a potential acquisition, right? With huge market in the US, huge market in large cities. It's better to do it too soon than too late.
And
right?
still, and I should say this because people don't think about it, but Seamless and now Grubhub. Seamless started its business as a B2B company, meaning they serviced investment banks, law firms, professional services firms with a relationship with the employer, all companies that he had people working late nights, after hours, company paying for lunches, hedge fund desks, things like that. So they have by far the largest corporate business in the country. And the corporate business is, it's highly profitable, very high retention rates. You don't get thrown out of Goldman Sachs very often if you're doing a good job.
Right.
And that becomes another avenue from which to grow the consumer base because, people use it in a corporate environment and ultimately they become consumer players as well. And so, the ability to have an Uber Eats for business is growing and strong, but Grubhub by far has the larger position. So I think from Uber's perspective, that's one of the niceties of that business, given also Grubhub's incredible strength in the New York metropolitan area and the other major metros in the country. And I think from their side, they see consolidation as a way to take costs out, make a better, broader offering across more cities. And I think the question will be, what impact does it have on the other constituencies, the restaurants, the consumers themselves?
I guess that remains to be seen. All right, let's open it up for questions. Darren, and I want to thank Darren for taking care of our AV here. So everybody's now unmuted. If anybody has questions, this is the time. We're going to try and mute some of the folks who are driving or walking their dogs.
Outside in the backyard enjoying a cocktail, hopefully.
Right, exactly. All right. Any questions from any of our participants?
Hey, Jonathan, it's Paul Reed. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, I was just thinking, all my college kids are home, and the last couple months they've been one's doing Instacart, one's doing Uber Eats, one's doing DoorDash. And I guess even though you're talking about how competitive it is, I feel like the barriers to entry in the market are pretty low. Is that true? I mean, can I set up Paul's delivery and kind of make a few bucks on the side? I guess I might not make $1 billion, but I mean, are the barriers to entry still pretty low, and how's that going to change over time?
Well, I don't know if I'd classify them necessarily as low. I mean, what makes for a barrier to entry is one is the ability to sign on a restaurant, and then two, I would describe as your fixed versus variable costs. So I think I would agree that there aren't significant fixed costs, meaning you don't have to invest that far ahead of your demand. But very quickly, if you do get that demand, it becomes very difficult to dispatch orders without technology and the rest of it. And some of that isn't that expensive at different levels of scale. But what I have learned in restaurants, the typical restaurant, not every restaurant, They're willing to do business with anyone who can drive incremental orders so long as they are not at capacity. And very few of them are at capacity, and those that are typically at capacity at certain times of the day. And so what I have found is a restaurant will say, was there a startup cost? No. Does it cost me anything? No. We only make, we used to say we only make a dime if you make $1, back in the early days in sort of a joking fashion. And so, no, I think generally the entry costs are not very high. There are plenty of companies out there that are just offering the delivery capability. So for those restaurants that have a very strong and loyal following and are driving their own direct website traffic, those orders are often being fulfilled and delivered by a company not named Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates, or Grubhub. And so you're seeing some of that. But the other side is a lot of those companies the ones that are successful. A lot of them have been consolidated into the other platforms, mostly in the time because it was so hard to hire drivers that the biggest asset was actually the drivers. But I think in general, yes, relatively low barriers to entry, but to achieve scale, you need to make investment ahead of revenue.
All right, thank you.
And sorry, Paul, the other thing I'd follow up with, in the early days when we were really low scale on the delivery side, we were really just starting out. So think circa 2014 and 15. Before that, Grubhub and Seamless were only working with self-delivery restaurants. We had to guarantee, because now they can, I keep saying they can really just pay these guys predominantly based on tips, to get to a wage that effectively clears the market. For staff, in the beginning, we had to guarantee wages. So if we were only, driver was only going to do 2 deliveries an hour, the tips from that wouldn't be enough.
Right.
So that might be one barrier to entry, where if you can't drive enough volume, then you have to effectively subsidize those wages until you achieve a certain level of scale.
Okay, thank you.
Then I'm going to ask one final question, which is, as a Cricket Club member, we've talked about how several of these various technologies could come into play at restaurants. What might you see being kind of the first step for Cricket to start to take advantage of some of these technologies in a way that can benefit our members?
Yeah. So, first of all, I'll say this to everyone. The club's done a great job of managing through, a crisis that most of us have never seen in our lifetime. Hopefully we'll never see again. And I think they've done a fabulous job of adapting really, really well. And every part of the business model and a set of assumptions has kind of been thrown out and everything's being remade. And that's, doing a great job around, the pickup and the rest of it. And so, look, I think step one is probably just facilitating orders, online in an even more effective manner. It's easy to do. It's easy to implement. And again, from the club's perspective, it will reduce manual labor, right? And, the ability just to get those orders through with less communication. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm understanding there's an impact, right? And somebody's job is to do that. And that's important to consider too. But what if we could redirect that person's time instead of taking a phone call? Instead of printing a form out, it could go directly into our production system. So I think in general, the ability to take orders digitally for takeout is sort of step one.
Right.
And I think, step two, and look, as we've been here for a couple of years now, the servers play an important role, I think, in the overall experience when we come in and we dine here. But that you could adapt that model where they play a certain role, but not necessarily take the order. You could have tabletop ordering and still have the value of somebody explaining the choices and the specials. I could see in and around the pool, the ability to order from your seat. You may still go pick it up, but why wait on a line? Why be, I'm thinking about these lines in the summer, even if we have people. So 6 feet between people.
Right.
We have this favorite ice cream shop in Stone Harbor that I'm thinking about for those who go there. It's a place called Springer's, which normally the line is around the block. Right. At 6 feet per person, I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to be all the way in Avalon by the time I need to get there. And so I do think, the ability to place some of these orders and get it into our production system are ways that don't compromise the experience, will add to the members' experience, and could lead in fact to just a better overall experience for the club and for the members.
Thank you for joining us, taking the time. This was great. I really appreciate it. We're trying to bring some good social content to our members since we can't all be here, seeing each other in person and kind of delivering that normal programmatic in-person value that we normally can. So again, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you all here at the club very soon.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Darren. I look forward to meeting those who are on the call who I haven't met in person.
All right. Thanks, everybody.